The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between a water bill and a coupon circular like it was nothing. A cream-colored envelope with my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Patricia Sterling, my ex-mother-in-law, a woman who had spent 9 years of my marriage looking at me the way you look at a stain on good furniture. I stood at my mailbox in the late October chill, the keys to my car still biting into my palm, and I read the name written on the paper, Kayla Ramirez. I did not cry. I did not let my hands shake. Inside the envelope was an invitation to a wedding. My ex-husband, Justin Sterling, was marrying a woman named Tiffany Vance on November the 16th at the Grand Legacy Ballroom in Dallas, Texas. Tucked behind the heavy cardstock was that handwritten note in a tilted cursive I knew too well. "We thought you should see the life Justin built after you. Come see the man you lost, Kayla. We want you to understand what you walked away from." Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I didn't break down and I didn't call him screaming. Instead, I walked straight into my house, set my keys on the counter, and opened my laptop. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. As a lead financial risk specialist and fraud auditor, I don't waste time on emotional noise. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, but now the account was closed. I opened my secure personal drive, compiled the historical asset anomalies I had been quietly tracking, and prepared the documentation to petition the court to reopen our old divorce decree based on systemic fraud. I wasn't going to hack his firm's accounts. I was going to leverage this newly uncovered evidence to let the Dallas County Court freeze his residual corporate operating funds legally. I looked across the room at my 8-year-old twin sons, Caleb and Logan, sitting at the kitchen table, finishing their homework. They had Justin's dark hair and his mother's distinct, sharp jawline. Two boys who had absolutely no idea they had been completely erased from their father's narrative. Justin had spent the last 5 years pretending they didn't exist, hiding them away like an embarrassing debt to safeguard his high society image among the elite finance families of Texas. Patricia had been his primary co-conspirator in that erasure. Everything stayed silent in the room, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. But in my head, the numbers were already lining up with lethal precision. Justin thought he was hosting a $1,500,000 display of dominance in Dallas. He believed his new empire was pristine and unassailable. He had no idea that the entire structural foundation of his life was about to be audited by the one person who knew exactly where the fraud was buried. Inside, my laptop screen glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. They weren't shocked by what they had done over the years. They were simply shocked that I had stopped playing along as their silent investor. The countdown had begun. To understand why this legal retaliation was entirely deserved, you have to look at the slow, calculated subtraction of my existence during our 9 years together. With my years of professional training, I noticed discrepancies other people walk right past. When we married, I brought an independent salary, a clean CPA license, and $84,000 in personal savings. But after Caleb and Logan were born, the trap closed smoothly. Justin and his mother convinced me that childcare costs were too prohibitive, that staying home was a luxury I preferred. It wasn't a luxury, it was a systematic removal of my financial independence. An outside observer often looks at a woman's silence in a toxic marriage and misinterprets it as weakness or unconditional compliance. They ask how a sharp financial professional could allow herself to be stripped of power so easily. The reality of this trap lies in a complex psychological condition known as learned helplessness. When a mother is systematically surrounded by complete financial control and total emotional isolation, a sudden, explosive reaction can jeopardize her capacity to protect her newborn children. My silence during those long years was not a surrender. It was a strategic retreat. It was a season where I consciously accepted the label of a passive wife to preserve the peace for Caleb and Logan, transforming our home into a secure containment room where I silently logged every single trace of asset draining. That compliance was actually an invisible chain, but I was the one holding the end of the leash, waiting for the first structural cracks to appear in Justin's power dynamic. The hallway of our old house smelled like burnt toast and calculated silence. I remember sitting in that dim space after putting the boys to bed, looking at the cracked photo frame on the wall that sat exactly where an apology should have been. Back then, looking at my reflection, I realized that every compromise I made was just a temporary cost for a future victory. Every time I found a receipt for an undisclosed steakhouse in Highland Park or a luxury wine bar in downtown Fort Worth that I had never attended, I photographed it. I built an archive labeled tax records on a hidden cloud drive. I knew that in the world of asset division, information is the absolute difference between having leverage and merely having feelings. Patricia Sterling used to sit in her South Lake mansion kitchen, sipping white wine, telling me that a wife's purpose was to be still water around a husband's current. She thought she was delivering timeless matriarchal wisdom. I knew she was simply running cover for her son's infidelity. While she smiled and complimented my cooking, she was actively helping Justin establish an exit strategy. They treated me like a temporary tenant in my own life, an inconvenient ledger entry to be minimized. But a forensic auditor does not stop looking just because the parameters become uncomfortable. When the emergency court order hit Justin's desk, freezing his residual corporate operating accounts, the reaction was immediate and entirely devoid of remorse. He didn't reflect on his actions, and he didn't try to make amends. He did what all cornered narcissists do when their leverage vanishes. He attacked. A cascade of vitriolic text messages illuminated my screen in the dark, lighting up my quiet bedroom at 11:50, 1 at night. He sat up in bed, the cold glow of the device reflecting off the walls, watching the screen flash over and over like an alarm system, failing in real time. His words poured out in a frantic, unhinged sequence. "You are behaving like an unhinged lunatic, Kayla. My mother sent that invitation out of pure grace. You're just a bitter, lonely failure trying to sabotage my wedding because your own life stopped moving forward when I left. I didn't text back a single word. I didn't engage in the emotional theater he was desperately trying to trigger to make me look unstable. I simply took screenshots, logged the precise timestamps, and archived the messages directly into my secure database. I went back to my spreadsheets. In my world, anger isn't loud, it is clinical. By morning, the toxicity had shifted to the public arena, exactly as I knew it would. Patricia Sterling posted a long, stylized update on her social media feed, framed in soft, carefully curated lighting designed to make her look like a grieving, righteous matriarch. Her caption read, "Some people forget the hands that carried them. True class cannot be bought, and bitterness only destroys the soul that holds it. Praying for peace for those who remain trapped in envy." Within hours, the country club circle in Fort Worth began to hum with their manufactured narrative. I became the subject of whispered gossip over morning tennis matches and afternoon luncheons. They were actively painting me as an unstable, vindictive ex-wife who was weaponizing the past because she couldn't tolerate seeing her former husband achieve true happiness. Patricia was calling our mutual acquaintances, her voice dripping with false concern, sighing about how tragic it was that I had let my resentment ruin my stability. They thought this public posturing would make me flinch. They genuinely believed that social pressure would force me to back down or drop the financial audit just to avoid a public scene. But narcissists always mistake quiet dignity for an absence of ammunition. They live so completely inside their theatrical production that they forget reality is built on unyielding facts. Every public lie they published didn't hurt me. It legally greenlit my next sequence of movement. By refusing to show a single shred of accountability, they completely removed any requirement for leniency. They had defined the boundaries of the war. I was simply going to audit the results. I stopped looking for excuses and called Grace, an unyielding family law attorney with a reputation for stripping the luxury veneer off unfaithful spouses. I sat across from her desk in Uptown Dallas, accompanied by Walter O'Shea, our forensic accountant. The office smelled like expensive coffee, crisp legal paper, and cold, objective reality. We laid out the Sterling asset audit files across the large table. Walter had spent 8 weeks tracking the subterranean pipeline Justin had built. It wasn't a standard asset dispute, it was an organized corporate extraction. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for 9 years, treating our love like a contract. But now I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. The spreadsheets Walter prepared revealed 3 hidden accounts that had never appeared on any joint financial disclosure form during our marriage. First, a private investment account under Justin's name alone, holding $526,000. Second, an account holding $162,000 tied to a shell LLC he had formed to manage side property investments, including a luxury condo in uptown Dallas that pulled in $3,600 a month in unreported rental revenue. This wasn't revenge, it was accounting. But the final document was the one that changed the temperature in the room completely, freezing the air between us. Walter discovered an account holding $68,000 registered in Patricia Sterling's name, funded entirely by regular transfers from Justin's business income. The timestamps on those transfers matched the exact weeks. Our household finances were tightly restricted, the seasons when Justin sat at our kitchen table, looking me in the eye, telling me his fund was failing and that we couldn't afford the boys' specialized development programs. While I was calculating grocery coupons and turning off utilities to save on bills, he was moving thousands of dollars to his mother's account. Grace drafted a formal legal demand, attached the 68-page forensic summary, and served it directly to Justin's counsel. It wasn't an emotional plea. It was a cold, structural calculation. We gave them a strict timeline to initiate an equitable settlement before the data went before a judge. Justin and his mother thought they were shocking me with their public posturing, but they were about to be shocked that I had stopped playing along. Just when Justin's legal team began preparing a civil defense strategy to protect the hidden assets, Walter uncovered the definitive kill shot. This was the exact information that elevated our case from a standard marital asset dispute to an active criminal liability. Everything changed on a rainy Friday afternoon in Walter's office. The room smelled like damp coats and old paper, a heavy quiet settling over the desks as he called me in. He wasn't holding his usual calm, analytical posture. He had a severe, cold focus in his eyes that told me the balance sheet had finally broken wide open. While auditing the foundational seed capital used to launch Justin's private equity fund years earlier, Walter had flagged a massive anomaly. The initial funding of $526,000 hadn't come from traditional corporate investors or an early real estate flip as Justin had claimed to his country club associates. It had been secured by selling a portfolio of environmental engineering patents left to me exclusively by my late father. To hide this transaction from a standard forensic check, Justin hadn't sold them openly. He had funneled the patents through a multi-layered shell company network registered in Delaware, burying the trail beneath layers of corporate ink. Walter displayed the corporate signature block on his monitor under high magnification, the blue light casting sharp lines across the digital text. The signature read Kayla Ramirez, but the alignment, the fluid stroke mechanics, and the uneven pen pressure were a calculated forgery. But it was the date on the fraudulent notary stamp that felt like a physical blow, leaving me entirely frozen in my chair. November 14th, 2018. That date triggered a vivid, painful memory. That was the exact morning I was in a Fort Worth hospital room, completely sedated and physically incapacitated after undergoing an emergency cesarean section with Caleb and Logan. The room back then had smelled of antiseptic and a terrifying, lonely silence. While I was lying unconscious in a recovery wing, entirely vulnerable and holding our newborn twins, Justin was outside using his mother's notary license to validate a forged transfer. He had liquidated my deceased father's legacy to capitalize his private equity venture, stealing from his own sedated wife to fund the luxury lifestyle he would later use to claim I wasn't sophisticated enough to share. Patricia had stamped her official seal on my theft while I couldn't even lift my hand. Grace didn't hesitate for a single second. She immediately forwarded the certified forgery analysis and the forensic report to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, sending a stamped copy to Justin's attorney at the exact same time. The path to a quiet civil settlement vanished instantly. He wasn't just an unfaithful husband or a selfish businessman anymore, he was a primary target in an active felony fraud investigation. The cream-colored envelope his mother had sent was no longer a symbol of my exclusion from their pristine new empire. It was a countdown timer for their absolute structural collapse. The late afternoon sun hit the glass facade of the Grand Legacy Ballroom in Dallas like a sheet of gold. The event was an extravagant production of high society, luxury crystal chandeliers, heavy flower arrangements, and an elite social circle sipping champagne. They thought they were attending a coronation. They didn't know they were sitting inside the radius of an active audit. I wore a dark green silk gown I bought with my own independent consulting dividends. I held Caleb and Logan by their hands, their white shirts crisp, their dark hair neatly parted. We walked through the grand entrance, stepping onto the polished marble with our heads held high. The room went dead silent, the sound of the string quartet suddenly feeling fragile as whispers rippled across the tables. The guests turned. The boys were the absolute visual replication of Justin, his jaw, his dark hair, his posture. The physical reality of their existence shattered the room's carefully curated atmosphere instantly. Patricia Sterling was standing only 8 feet away in a champagne dress. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the polished marble floor. Her expression of high-born composure came completely apart. When a narcissistic family system uses wealth and material symbols to crush another person's dignity, they always operate under a massive illusion of power. They believe that a thick wallet and a $1 million high society veneer can turn cruelty into legitimacy. But in reality, their social status is merely a temporary layer rented with deception and stolen money. They try to possess every material luxury to cover up the absolute emptiness of their true character. This is the core distinction in social psychology between having and being. Justin and Patricia had the money, the mansions, and the extravagant wedding, but they did not embody the intrinsic honor or dignity required to stand before the light of objective facts. The exact moment I entered that ballroom was not to cause a loud, dramatic scene, but simply to bring reality into a space built on an optical illusion. When their morally bankrupt vault was exposed to the elite of Dallas, their whole empire of vanity collapsed like a sandcastle facing a sudden tidal wave, turning his lavish wedding into a public execution of their lies. Justin approached us, pale, his breath shallow beneath his custom tuxedo jacket. He looked at the twins, then at me, his voice scrambling. "Kayla, please. Why are you doing this here?" Tiffany doesn't know. She doesn't understand about the boys. Please leave before you destroy everything. Logan adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt, his left eyebrow arching with that cold, skeptical expression he inherited straight from the Sterling gene pool. He looked his biological father in the eye and delivered the final, unbothered blow of natural justice. "Hi, Dad." He said it with the casual indifference you use for a stranger you recognize vaguely from an old photograph. Justin stood paralyzed, completely emptied of his performance, unable to close his mouth as his new bride watched from across the room with an expression of pure, unfolding horror. The legal fallout executed itself with clinical precision. Forced to confront the undeniable documentation of the patent forgery, Justin's defense team abandoned the case entirely to avoid immediate federal incarceration. The final court decree awarded me full ownership of our Fort Worth home, with its $400,000 in equity, half of the hidden investment account totaling $263,000, a proportional share of the shell company assets valued at $58,000, along with maximum legal child support of $5,000 per month for the twins and spousal support of $3,500 per month. The federal prosecutors moved forward with the corporate fraud probe. Justin avoided jail time only through a highly restrictive plea deal that stripped him of his financial licenses, and his private equity fund collapsed completely as investors pulled their capital to distance themselves from the scandal. Patricia Sterling's notary license was permanently revoked, and she was indicted as a co-conspirator in the federal fraud scheme, forcing her to liquidate her remaining assets to cover corporate restitution. They live now in a small, rented space on the periphery of Fort Worth, completely blacklisted from the elite social circles that once defined their value. Many people are trapped in toxic relationships for their entire lives because they are weighed down by a crushing sense of guilt over the word bloodline. They believe that no matter how cruel or exploitative their relatives are, cutting ties is an absolute moral wrong. But the harsh truth this marriage taught me is that a true family relationship does not lie in matching genetic codes within chromosomes, but in the responsibility to protect, appreciate, and be decently present in each other's lives. When a father is pathetic enough to attempt to sign away his parental rights to 2 children just to evade his financial obligations, only to have the judge shred his petition and hold him fully accountable, he has erased his name from the family definition. My decisive choice to walk away from the Sterling alliance and reject Patricia's late-night pleading was not heartless. It was the ultimate act of courage to protect my own boundaries. Severing a toxic blood tie is not a betrayal. It is a personal revolution to plant a clean, peaceful seed for Caleb and Logan's future, allowing them to grow up unpolluted by the hypocrisy of biological parents who never deserved the title. My sons are safe, and the house we occupy in Fort Worth is entirely secure. The pomegranate tree in our backyard is producing fruit this season. Its branches heavy and resilient. I am a senior partner at my auditing firm now. I sit on my back porch in the cool evening air, watching my boys trace the stars, and I feel the profound, unshakable peace of a life built entirely on objective reality. I've come to realize that looking back at the cream-colored card that started this journey reveals 3 absolute laws of survival that every woman must internalize. First, what you perceive is not paranoia. The exact second you begin apologizing to your intellect for noticing discrepancies, you have become an active collaborator in your own deception. Trust the numbers that refuse to balance. Trust the phone turned face down. Trust the unexplained warmth that arrives precisely when your resources are being minimized. Your intuition is not an emotional defect. It is a forensic asset. Second, documentation is your only true shield. It is not petty, it is not bitter, and it is not cynical. It is the cold, systematic conversion of what you know into what you can definitively prove in a conference room. Proof is the baseline difference between securing your freedom and being gaslit by an attorney who calls you emotional during mediation. Every date, every statement, every transaction record matters. Third, you owe absolutely no one silence regarding what they did to you. You are not the custodian of their reputation. You are not required to protect the dignity of people who were actively draining yours under your own roof. Keeping the peace at the expense of your own boundaries is not a virtue, it is a compliance mechanism designed to keep you small. True closure isn't about granting forgiveness to those who destroyed your trust. It's about reclaiming your power so completely that their existence no longer occupies a single cent of your mental equity. Some doors you walk through are not losses. They are simply the weights you finally had the competence to drop. If this architecture resonated with you, if you recognize a number that doesn't add up in your own life, leave your comment below with your location. Share this video with a woman who needs to stop waiting and start documenting. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Remember, the truth is always worth more than the comfort of not knowing. Here, we audit the truth. A strong hug to everyone watching. And remember, you do not owe anyone silence about what they did to you. Not one word of it.